Okay, good afternoon, everyone. We want to thank you all for joining us this afternoon as we present how to navigate the temporary assistance for stabilizing childcare, or as we say for short, TASCC grant application. And so I first and foremost want to thank Voices for Alabama's Children for hosting us today on the webinar. And we appreciate their partnership in allowing us to use their platform to be able to host the webinar today. So let me introduce myself. I'm Jennifer Cannell. I am the Division Director for Child Care Services Division here at the department. And just want to also introduce those that are here at the table with me as we are spread apart in social distancing. So Candace, would you like to introduce yourself?
I'm Candace Keller. I'm the Program Manager of the Office of Child Care Subsidy.
And Bernard?
Bernard Houston, Administrator for Child Care Services and Workforce Development.
And I'm Faye Nelson, Deputy Commissioner for the Department of Human Resources, Family Resources.
So that is who we are, and I want to thank you again for joining us. Candace and myself will be presenting on the webinar today. Candace is going to be helping us monitor the chat box for questions and to help us with that question and answer session at the end. And if there's anything that she needs to jump in and remind us to say, she's going to do that for us. But we're going to go right into our presentation today because we are excited to be able to offer this opportunity to the child care community. So I just wanted to begin by explaining and letting all of you know that may not be aware that the Department of Human Resources is the lead agency in the state for administering the Child Care Development Fund, and we sometimes refer to that as CCDF for short. And that CCDF fund is authorized under the Child Care and Development Block Grant. And back in a few months ago, you all, I'm sure, are familiar with the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act, also known as the CARES Act. And through that act, we were appropriated nationwide. An additional $3.5 billion was appropriated in supplemental CCDF funding to allow states to prevent, prepare for, and respond to the coronavirus threat, and also to allow expanded flexibility to provide child care assistance to children and families. So the allocated amount that we as an agency received for the state of Alabama was almost $65 million. And DHR has really taken a trifold or three triune approach to supporting the child care community. So if you look at the slide, you can see that our metaphor for this is like a three-legged stool. So we know that when you have a stool, the legs support the seat. So the seat is representative of our child care community. And we have taken three approaches to help support our child care community during this pandemic. First and foremost, we provided our child care providers who are participating on the child care subsidy program with weekly sustainability payments. And these payments were based on their enrollment pre-COVID, so back in March before the COVID hit. And our providers who participate on the child care subsidy program have been receiving payments equal to 50% of their child care subsidy enrollment, regardless of if the children were attending or if the facility was open or closed. So we started making these payments the first week in April, and these payments will continue until August the 1st. And we are pleased to have been able to provide over $39 million thus far in these sustainability payments to help support the child care community in that regards. The second approach that we have taken to support the child care community is by the creation of a protective services group for those who belong to the healthcare field in the healthcare community, as well as those who are first responders. And we are providing child care assistance to those families. So this is without regard to their income. It is a temporary child care assistance program that we are providing for them. And this is helping them stay in the workforce, on the front lines, serving the medical needs of Alabamians during this crisis. And we have been providing that since April. And right now we are continuing that assistance through the end of August. And our third approach, and the reason why we are gathered today on the webinar today, is with our TASCC grants, and that is support that we are providing to our child care providers to help them sustain operations and offset costs of reopening. So we will move right ahead and go into talking about what we are our topic of discussion today. So TASCC is an acronym for Temporary Assistance for Stabilizing Child Care. And the purpose of this grant is it's support for providers to help them overcome financial difficulties that are due to the coronavirus. So we know that this has been a very unprecedented, difficult time for the child care community. Our workforce has been greatly impacted, and we want to do what we can to help support and sustain the industry. So this that we're offering through the TASCC grant, it is a non-competitive grant process, and it's contingent upon availability of funding. So we plan to award approximately $13 million in TASCC grants to child care providers. And additionally, this is one-time funding. So as we're providing those weekly sustainability payments, this is not something that's weekly or monthly. This is a one-time grant award that we are offering. So moving forward, we have gotten lots of questions so far and feedback, which is why we wanted to host or present this webinar that's hosted by Voices today, so that we can make sure that everyone has the opportunity to get the information firsthand and can ask any questions. But after today's webinar, if you want more information or need to know where to go, please go to our website. So if you'll go to the child care page, you can see the web address on the slide, and just make sure that you put the / in child-care, and you'll see on the slide, you can see right under, when you get to our page, you'll see a section for coronavirus information, and you'll see a whole section dedicated to the TASCC grants. You'll be able to download the grant guidance as well as download the application. And the application is an online fillable application. If you want to type in the information and then print out a copy to email or send in instead of handwrite your application. So let's talk about who is eligible to receive the grant. And let's see if I can there we go. And so you would have to, these are not pick and choose, you would have to meet every one of these eligibility criteria in order to be eligible for the grant. So the first thing is you would need to have a child care license from DHR to operate a child care facility as of July the 1st. And the reason we are able to offer this only to those licensed facilities is due to the Child Care Safety Act of 2018 that precludes us from giving state or federal funding to facilities that are not licensed. So everyone would need to have their license to be able to apply. The second eligibility criteria is that you can have no adverse action imposed by DHR against your license. So when we say adverse action, we are not talking about if you have a current deficiency that has not been corrected or if you have corrective action. Adverse action is defined as three things. So if your facility is on probation, if you are if we have moved to revoke your license, so it's under revocation, or if we have suspended your license, you would not be eligible to apply for the grant. Otherwise, if those three do not pertain to you, then you meet that eligibility criteria. The third item that we have is the having an Alabama STAARS vendor code. And we'll talk about this more in detail in just a moment, but I just want to say right now, we have gotten some questions with individuals that have confused the STAARS vendor code with our quality rating and improvement system, which is called Alabama Quality STAARS. This is not Alabama Quality STAARS. This is a STAARS vendor code, which is a payment system, and we'll discuss that more in detail in just a moment. But just wanted to bring that to your attention, not to get those confused. So you would have to have that vendor code in order to be eligible. Okay, and then the next eligibility criteria would be to have your facility would need to already be open and operating, or you would need to plan to reopen no later than August the 17th. So the purpose of this grant is to help sustain facilities and offset those costs of reopening. And we know that Alabama needs to the workforce needs to get back to work, and if they cannot find childcare, then they cannot return to work. So we ask that those facilities that are applying for the grant already be open and operating or be reopened by that date. And last but not least, you will need to remain open for a minimum of 1 year from the date that the grant award letter is dated. And so when we say be open for 1 year from that date, we are not talking about typical closures that would occur during the ordinary course of business. So we are not talking about closures for holidays. We're not talking about a temporary closure closed one day due to illness or perhaps inclement weather. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about permanent closures where you go out of business or permanently close and you're no longer serving children and families in your community. So that is what is addressed there. Okay, so that's our eligibility criteria, and we're going to move on and we're going to talk more about that STAARS vendor code that we mentioned earlier. So in order to obtain a STAARS vendor code, first let me tell you what STAARS is. STAARS is an acronym. There's 2 A's in there, and STAARS is an acronym for the State of Alabama Accounting and Resource System. It's the statewide accounting system that supports all financial, procurement, and human resources transactions. It's not to be confused with Alabama Quality STAARS again, that's a different program. And all vendor interactions, including solicitations, purchase orders, payments, are maintained in the STAARS system. So DHR does not run this system. It's not a system run by DHR, it's run by the Department of Finance. And everyone that receives payments from any state agencies must be registered in STAARS. So you must register and obtain a STAARS vendor code in order to receive a payment or do business with the state. Okay, so to register, you're going to go to this web address that you see on this slide, procurement.stars.alabama.gov. And you'll see on this homepage, when you get to it, you can see the red circle around the register link. And if you do not already have a vendor's account, a vendor self-service account, this is where you register to get that. And once your account is set up and active, you can track your payments. You can sign up to receive EFT payments, and you can also manage your vendor account information within that system. But we do want to make sure that everyone understands that your STAARS account and your vendor code, it has to be in active status in order for the grant application to be processed. So if for some reason you have registered but your account is not yet active, that means that there's some piece of documentation or information that needs to be submitted to the Department of Finance and the STAARS system in order to get that account activated. We at DHR do not have any control or anything to do with the STAARS system whatsoever. So we cannot help get your account activated. So if they have asked you to submit some information, you need to make sure you're submitting it to the right place. So we've already received a handful of voided checks and different things like that, and we cannot do anything with those. So if the STAARS system has asked for that information, please be sure you're submitting it to the right place to get that account activated. I do also want to mention if you need help with your setting up your STAARS account, we can only direct you to call the number that you see on your screen. That is the STAARS helpline, and also you can email. So these are you have 2 avenues to get help to get your STAARS account activated and registered. And this is how you would seek assistance in getting that done. So that hopefully explains the process of getting the STAARS vendor code that you will need to place on your application. Okay, moving forward, how much is the grant award? Everyone, I'm sure, is curious to know how much is eligible to be received through this process. So the base rate of the grant award is $300 per child. And that amount is going to be based on a formula that includes several things. One of those is going to be your daytime license capacity. So when we say your daytime license capacity on your license, we are looking at what your daytime capacity is. We are not including your nighttime, and we're not combining daytime and nighttime. So we're only looking at your daytime license capacity. The other item that we're looking for is the number of children that were enrolled in the Child Care Subsidy Program effective July 1. And last but not least, we're looking at the number of children funded by Head Start and Early Head Start effective July 1. So the reason why we want to know that is because we've already been supporting the providers on the Child Care Subsidy Program for those children that are on the program through the weekly sustainability payments. Additionally, the CARES Act allocated $750 million to Head Start and Early Head Start grantees. And so they are receiving that additional funding. It's being allocated to each Head Start and Early Head Start grantee. And so they're already receiving support from the CARES Act through that. And so that's why we are using this formula here, and we're going to look at it now. So step 1 of the formula is to take your daytime license capacity and subtract your number of subsidy children. And again, that's going to be the number of subsidy children that are enrolled as of July 1, not the number of subsidy children that are in attendance. The reason for that is because this weekly sustainability payments that those providers have been receiving have been based on that enrollment, not based on the attendance. And so we're using the same method here. So these are the number of children that are enrolled in the subsidy program, regardless of whether they're attending or not. And then you'll also subtract from that amount the number of slots or number of children that are funded by Head Start and Early Head Start. So once you take your daytime capacity, subtract those two amounts. If they're applicable to you, you're going to get your total. Then once you have your total, you're going to move to step 2. And step 2 is very simple. You're going to take that total, you're going to multiply it by $300, and that's going to give you your estimated grant amount that you're eligible to receive through from the TASCC grant. Let's make sure that I've got everything there. I think so. I believe that we've talked about. Oh, I knew one thing that I need to mention. If you have a child who is enrolled in both programs, so our Early Head Start Child Care partnerships, this will apply to you all. So if you have a child who is enrolled in both the subsidy program and is also funded by Head Start or Early Head Start, then you subtract that child from both of those categories. So if I had 8 children that were on the subsidy program and in Early Head Start, I would subtract them once in the subsidy children and once again in the Head Start, Early Head Start as well. Okay, so let's move forward and look at an example of the formula. So in this example, we have a child care provider that has a daytime license capacity of 75 children. 15 of those children were enrolled in the Child Care Subsidy Program effective July 1st. And again, it's not how many were attending, it's how many were enrolled. So 15 of those children were enrolled in the Child Care Subsidy Program, and then 8 of those children were funded by Early Head Start as of July 1st. So with my formula, I'm going to take step 1. I'm going to take my daytime capacity of 75, and I'm going to subtract my subsidy children. So 75 minus 15 is 60, and then 60 minus 8 are the Early Head Start. That leaves me with 52, which is my total. So I'm going to take the 52 children, multiply that in step 2 times $300, and that's going to give me a grant total of $15,600. So that's how it works. Okay, let's move forward and talk about the budget allocation plan. So just to let you know, we've gotten probably about 400 applications thus far. And one of the things that we're seeing from some of the applications is they are including their center annual budget. So that's not what this section is asking for. We don't need to know your operating budget or anything like that. All we're asking for in this section is how you plan to allocate and spend the grant funds that are awarded to you. So this section is your plan for how the grant funding will be utilized. And there's different categories. I believe there's a total of 7. You'll need to utilize at least one of the categories. So if you only want to use one category and put your whole entire grant award in that one category, that's fine. But the amounts allocated in all the categories must equal up to the total grant amount. Additionally, your actual expenditures cannot differ more than 10% from the budgeted allocation amount. And we'll talk about that more later. So if you have questions about that, we'll address those in just a few minutes. So let's move forward and talk about our allocation categories. We've got these different categories. The first one you can see is retaining or hiring employees or substitute teacher pay. So this category is intended for planned spending related to employing teaching staff and non-teaching staff. So custodial staff, cooks, that type of thing. Eligible costs for this category will include things such as salary and wages, bonus pay, hazard pay, health insurance benefits, life insurance benefits, any flexible benefits, health insurance such as vision, dental, the provider's portion of federal and state taxes and withholdings, and costs associated with hiring a new teacher or with employing substitute teachers. So that's what you would be able to spend on funds for in this section or this category. Moving to the next category, which is classroom materials and supplies. This category is intended spending related to ensure that all classrooms are safe and healthy and nurturing educational spaces. So eligible costs for this category include things such as typical materials and supplies that you would see in a classroom that are developmentally appropriate, such as furniture, books, art supplies, blocks, accessories, curriculum, and instructional technology. Moving on to the next category is unreimbursed food. This category is intended for planned spending related to food services that are not reimbursable through another program, such as the USDA Child and Adult Care Food Program or the USDA Summer Nutrition Program. So this would be for unreimbursed food. Moving on to facilities cost. Facilities cost is a category for planned spending for the costs necessary to maintain the facility. So eligible costs for this category would include things such as lease payments, mortgage payments, your building insurance, utilities, and facility maintenance. And just as a side note, the TASCC grant cannot be used for capital improvements to real property. So that would not be eligible use of funding of the funds for this opportunity. Moving on to the dark green category, supplies to adhere to the CDC and ADPH guidelines. So this is for planned spending related to the costs that might be incurred to adhere to those additional CDC guidelines to prevent the spread of COVID-19. Eligible costs include things such as cleaning supplies, cleaning services, personal protective equipment, or the cost of measures to limit contact between individuals. So if you need to install plexiglass in your lobby as you children and families enter the facility or something like that. Tuition relief for families is the blue category that you see on the screen, and this category is intended for planned spending that would be as a result of providing tuition relief for families that are paying to maintain their child care slot at a program. So if you have children that are not able to attend right now, but they're still paying to save their slot, that would be for this category. And last but not least, we have the other. Now, do be aware that if you put any funding in the other category, you would need to provide documentation on what that funding is for, what you intend to use that funding for, and why it doesn't fit into any of the other categories that are already provided. And this category would require, to be able to expend the funds allocated to this category, it would require written approval from the department. So that will be issued to you at the time of the grant award. So those are all of the categories. Hopefully that's straightforward for you all, and you know where you want to allocate the funding that you will receive from the grant. So let's talk about when the application is due. The application must be postmarked or received by email no later than August the 7th. So it has to be postmarked by that date or received in hand by that date. Applications are processed in the order that they are received, and they must be accurate and complete. And no late applications can be accepted. And I did want to mention to you all to please submit your application one time unless we have asked you to provide any questions, any corrections. The reason for that is because It will slow down the process of us being able to process the applications in a more timely manner if everyone submits their application once through email and additionally mails that same application in as well. We're having to sort through the duplicates to be able to get to the applications that we need to process. Okay, moving on, how do you submit your application? So there are two ways that you are able to submit your application. One would be through email, and you can see the email address here, quality.enhancement@dhr.alabama.gov. Once your application is emailed, you will the application will be forwarded to a worker who is going to process the application, and you do not need to then also mail it in. Email is fine if you choose that option. If you prefer to hand mail your application in, you can see the address there, and we will process it once we receive it by mail. Okay, so let's see what the application actually looks like. So the application has 4 sections. This is the first section. And just to go over a couple of high points with you, the name of the applicant there is the first line that you see. And the name of the applicant is the authorized designee who is signing the application and agreeing to the terms and conditions. So the name of the applicant does need to be an individual. Even if your facility is a corporation, we need to have an applicant who is signing that they are the authorized designee to complete the application on behalf of the corporation or LLC. Of course, we've already talked about the Alabama STAARS vendor code that's right up there at the top, and we all need to make sure to include that. Please make sure that you include a valid telephone number and email address, because if there's anything incorrect or that needs to be added, if your application is missing information, we will need to have a valid email address and telephone number to contact you to be able to get those corrections so that we can go ahead and get your application processed. Your facility name, the licensee name, the license number, your facility physical address, and your license capacity must match what is printed on the license, your current license issued from DHR. So if those items do not match, then your application will be considered incomplete or incorrect. And you will have to correct all of those things. It will slow down our ability to issue you the grant award, because you'll have to get all those corrections into us. So please make sure that that information matches before you send it in. And of course, you also need to include the number of children that were enrolled as of July 1st in the subsidy program and the number of children that were funded by Head Start effective July 1 or early Head Start. Additionally, if you've got a different mailing address that we need to use other than the facility physical address, be sure to include that as well. So that's all in Section 1, general information. Section 2 of the application, we're going back to that formula that we discussed earlier. You're going to take your license capacity, subtract the number of subsidy children, subtract the number of Head Start and early Head Start slots, and get your total. And you're going to take your total, multiply that by $300, and that's your estimated grant total. So that's Section 2. Section 3 of the application is going to be your budget allocation plan. So those are the items that we just discussed, and this is going to be your plan for how you're going to use the grant funding. So no matter how many categories you use, as long as you use at least one category, your total, all of those line items have to total to and equal your grant total. And again, this is not your operating budget, your annual operating budget for your facility. This is just your plan on how you're going to allocate the grant funding, your grant award. And last but not least on the application is Section 4, which is the acknowledgement of the terms, submissions, and your payment. By signing the application and submitting that to us, and by accepting the grant award, you certify and agree to the terms that are described on this page. And the name of the applicant that was back in Section 1 should be the person whose signature and printed name are in this section. So if those don't match, we'll have to have you correct that before we can process your application. So that is plain and simple how to submit the application to us. And now we're going to talk about what happens once your application is submitted. So we've got a whole team of people working to process these applications, and we are processing them as quickly as possible, and we're processing them in the order that they are received. So go ahead and get your application submitted to us so that it can get in the line of those processed. If your application is incomplete or if it has any errors, then you're going to receive a written notification of that. And you're going to receive in that written notification, it will tell you all the items that must be corrected before your application can be approved. We are going to send you that notification via mail, hand mail, through the postal system, as well as email. So as you know, check your email, and as soon as you receive the email, go ahead and don't wait on the copy to come in the mail. But we want to cover all our bases and make sure that you receive it one way or the other. So we're going to send the incomplete letter both of those ways. And then you will have 5 business days to resubmit your corrections back to us. Those corrections can come back to us via email. That would be the quickest way. But you could also mail them back in. But to make sure that you have them back to us within the 5 business days, we recommend that you would email those corrections back to us. So if you submitted your application completely, we can go ahead and approve it. But if your application cannot be approved, you'll have to correct these items. So let's move forward. What happens once your application is considered complete with no items that are incorrect, and we can go ahead and get that application approved. So once the application is approved, you will receive a written award notice. That's going to be mailed to you through the postal system, as well as emailed to you, a copy of your grant award letter. The grant award letter is going to contain the amount of your grant award, so you will know how much you are expected to receive. Once we issue you the award notice, we are going to immediately send that request for payment to Alabama STAARS. And so we're going to do that promptly. Once it hits Alabama STAARS, then it is out of DHR's division, and we are dependent upon the Alabama Department of Finance to process those payments in the STAARS system. So we are not able to give you, a definite time frame where we can tell you you'll receive your payment in this many days. However, you can log back in to your vendor self-service account in STAARS and check your payment transactions there to know if it's been processed. And so we are doing what we can on our end to send that over as quickly as possible so that you can get your payment in a timely manner. And then, of course, a subject that we don't like to talk about but is necessary to address. So what happens if your application is denied? If your application is denied for a valid reason, then you're going to also receive that denial letter in writing. You will receive that in the mail through the postal system as well as an email, and it will cite the reason for the denial. So some of the reasons that there could be for your application to be denied could be that if your facility is not licensed, if your facility is under some type of adverse action, if your facility is not open or will not reopen before August the 17th, if you fail to submit your corrections prior to 5 business days, and also if your application is received late. So if it's not postmarked by August the 7th or received via email by August the 7th. So those are some reasons for the denial. Also, if you're not eligible to receive any of the funding, it will be denied as well. So for example, if your capacity was 20 children, but you also had 20 children on the subsidy program, 20 minus 20 is 0. 0 times 300 is still 0. So you would not be eligible to receive any funding, and then your application would be denied for that reason because there would not be an amount to award. So moving forward, let's talk about what happens after the grant is awarded. So once you receive your grant award letter and you are issued your funding through the payment method that you selected through Alabama STAARS, whether that is a check, a physical check, or through EFT, we will need you to expend all of the grant funds prior to December the 31st. So December the 31st would be your deadline to expend the funds. Your actual costs cannot differ from your budgeted amount by more than 10% for each category. And we're going to discuss that a little more in just a moment. So if you have questions about that, just hold those. And you're going to need to keep detailed, accurate documentation of all of your expenditures with the grant funding. Finally, we'll need you to submit an expenditure report to DHR no later than January the 31st. Okay, we will be conducting random audits of the grant awards, so of the expenditures from the grant awards. So please be sure to keep all of your documentation and keep it organized if you're one of those that are selected in the random audit. And we also recommend that you submit that expenditure report as quickly as possible after you have expended all the funds. So you cannot submit the expenditure report until all the funds have been expended, but if you expend all the funds by October, we encourage you to go ahead and get that expenditure report in and not wait until January. But if you're one of the ones who does not expend all of the funds until the end of December, then we are giving you until the end of January to get that in. You will receive we're going to talk more about the expenditure report in just a moment, and you will receive a copy of the expenditure report with the grant award, and we will be posting a copy of the expenditure report to download at our website in that same spot that I showed you earlier after August the 7th. However, we did not want to upload it yet because we did not want, it looks very similar to the application, and we didn't want people to confuse the application with the expenditure report and submit the incorrect thing. So let's go back and look at our example from earlier of the child care provider that had the capacity, daytime capacity of 75 children. 15 of those were on the subsidy program and 8 were on the early Head Start program. So she has a total of 52, or he or she, and then the grant total is $15,600. So let's look at an example of the budgeted amount that they had versus the actual cost. So this is back to that, I told you we would get to it in just a moment, about the 10% difference. Your actual expenditures cannot differ more than 10% for your budgeted allocation amount. So using that provider as an example, whose award was $15,600, their budgeted amount on their application was the following. And you can see how much they put in each category for their budgeted amount, and that was their plan for how to spend the funding. They weren't planning to use anything in the other category, but they have something in all the other ones. And then you can see the column, which is the 10% difference. So if the plan is to spend $10,000 on retaining or hiring employees, then your actual expenditures cannot go below 10% or above 10% of that amount. So 10% of $10,000 is going to be $1,000. So your actual expenditures for that category cannot be below $9,000 or above $11,000. And so that is the way we are determining. So for those of you that might have questions about the 10% of your actual expenditures, that's how we're determining that. And you can see the example for each category there. That is the range that your expenditures must meet. So if you are planning to spend $10,000 in retaining or hiring employees, it would not be acceptable to only spend $1,000 in that category. It has to match within 10% above or below of your planned spending. Let's look at another example. So let's say that this provider had their budgeted amount, and then they had their 10% difference. And then they expended the grant funds, and they have their actual costs. So you can see that in retaining or hiring staff, the budgeted amount was $10,000, and their actual cost that they spent in this category was $9,820. So that is within the 10% range above or below. So that is acceptable. So we know that your spending can't be right on the dollar, so we're given that 10% allowance. Her budgeted amount added up to $15,600, and her actual costs also added up to $15,600. You need to expend all the funding, but you have to do so in a way that you're allocating in the your actual spending in the categories does not differ more than 10%. So I hope that that makes sense to everyone. And you can see in this example, her actual costs in every category fit within the 10% range. Okay, so we are ready to move on, and we're going to show you the breakdown of the expenditure report. Even though it's not posted on our website yet, we'll post it after the grant applications are due, because we didn't want anyone to get confused again about downloading the wrong thing to send in. But this is what the expenditure report will look like. Again, you'll receive a copy of this with your award letter. Okay, so that section 1 is again going to be all the general information, just like what you entered on the application. And the second section of the expenditure report is going to be your amount budgeted in one column for each category and your actual amount expended. So this, when we see your actual amount expended, it should fit within that 10% of the categories, just like we showed you on this example here. So those actual costs have to be, cannot be more than 10% below or above what your allocated amount was that you had budgeted for that category. And then your total, of course, in both categories should, both columns, excuse me, should match the total grant award. So this is your expenditure on how you're showing us or documenting to us what categories the funding was expended for. And then the report will have the certification statement that we are requiring you to sign and date as well. And that is it. The back of the signature, the back of the expenditure report has the instructions for you all. And there are 2 ways, again, just like 2 ways to submit the application, there's 2 ways to submit the expenditure report. You can email that, or you can mail it to the address that you see there. So it's the exact same way that you can submit the application, or the same 2 ways that you can submit the expenditure report once all the funds are submitted, or excuse me, expended. Okay, so I think that brings us to the end of everything that we had to present to you. And I know that Candace has been very busy over here in the chat box, and we are going to now have some question and answer. So if you have any questions that you would like for us to answer, Candace is going to tell us some of the questions that she has been answering over here. And if you have another question that has not been asked or answered, then go ahead and we type it in the chat box, and we will try to answer as many as possible before we have to get off in about 10 minutes. 10 to 4, it looks like we've got 14 minutes left. So Candace, what kind of questions do we have so far?
All right. Well, the primary question that I've seen is, one, it will be license. For you to participate in the grant opportunity, you must have received a license from DHR on or before July 1, 2020. Anyone who's working on another center and is are in the midst of being licensed, the license had to already been activated by July 1. Another question is the question which is confusing everyone is enrollment. For your private pay, we do not collect enrollment information on your private pay. We are using actually your capacity. That capacity is found on your license. If you serve day and night children, you would use your daytime capacity only. Regarding the children that are enrolled in the subsidy program, those, and I'll put a note, a little tip. This Sunday, go into your web portal and count the number of children on the payment screen. That is the actual number that we will be using, because we do know that enrollment fluctuates every day, can go up and down every day. However, if you're looking for an exact date of enrollment on this coming Sunday, if you go into your web portal, you will find the exact number of children that we are using. So make sure you count every child on that page, not just the children who have who receive funding, but every child on that page. Another question is about the expenditures. Your grant amount is what you're using to budget. It is not, as Jennifer said, it is not the budget for your entire year, for the month, how often you get your billing in, how often you make your payments out. it is for your budget. So if you have $6,000, the question is, how are you going to spread that money over those categories? That's what we're looking for in your budget. And that total amount must equal the total amount in section 2 of the application, which would be your potential grant award. Another question is what types of things you can replace or you can purchase in each category. If you refer to the guidance has examples of every type of purchase that you can make. If you're still in need or have some questions, you would go to someone from Voices just posted that email address to quality.enhancement@dhr.alabama.gov, and you will get a prompt response. Another question is just came up: retaining and hiring employees. How can you show payroll taxes? However you keep your documentation is what you would need to also keep up with. Use your best judgment. Your best business practice is regarding how do you make your how you expend the money, invoices, receipts, anything that. And I say this much: whatever you would use for the IRS, you keep it for us as well. The audit won't. I don't know how the audit would be, but that is about the close that I can explain the importance of having documentation for this funding. One last question: if a government committee chooses to close temporary closures, however, when we say open operating for a year, we meaning that you're not out of business, meaning permanently out of business. Temporary closures for weather, anything closed for COVID, that won't be held against you because we've already gone through that, where your own health departments or any kind of governing orders will offer this way for you all to close. There's nothing that you don't have any choice over. If you choose to close your business because you want to retire, then that's something that's different. We'll have to discuss that further about how you would do the repayment. If children are allowed in the system but not attending the center, how do you calculate that? Again, it is based on your enrollment as of July 1. For all our subsidy providers out there, if the tip is go into the web portal on Sunday and count all the children, regardless of them attending or not, every child that is on that payment sheet, you need to count, and you would add that into the number of children that you would subtract from your total license capacity, and it's your license daytime capacity.
And Candace, I guess if they want to be sure, if they're still not sure what that number should be, they can always email the quality .enhancement@dhr.alabama.gov, and we can
and we'll supply that number. Right. Because we don't want to we do not have a time frame as far as in when your application will be processed. We do not have a time frame of when you will be paid. The only time frames you've been given, of course, in this presentation, however, do keep in mind that upon the moment that you get the grant award, the grant award, until December 31st is your time frame for spending the money. All dollars should be spent. Oh, and also, while we don't want you to shortchange yourself in the grant, if you're going to get a grant amount of $5,000, make sure all your allocation, your budget allocations total to $5,000. Is there a grant payment sent directly to the center? The grant payment is sent directly to the option that you choose in the Alabama STAARS system. If you choose EFT, which is direct deposit, it would be direct deposit into the account that you supply. If it is by check, it will be sent to the check and mailed to the address that you provide in the Alabama STAARS system. Very unfortunate, we here at DHR cannot answer any questions regarding the STAARS system. Even if you get a incomplete letter, and the letter has missing or invalid STAARS vendor code, you would need to contact the Alabama STAARS system in order to get more information concerning that. We do not have, we're not privileged to that system, and it is not one of our operating systems, and nor would we want to speak on something that's not what we do every day. So if you have questions regarding the vendor code, and it's the Alabama STAARS vendor code system, not the Alabama Quality STAARS. However, we are very excited that people are talking about Alabama Quality STAARS now, and quite interested in joining. So we're hoping those numbers will increase the upcoming year as well. I submitted my application and failed to put my daycare license. Unfortunately, if you have any errors on your applications, do not submit a new application. Please wait until you get the letter from one of our staff members via email and through the mail to let you know what is missing, because you could very well submit an application again to correct the error that you know that you had an error on. However, there may be another error that we found that you need to correct as well. So we just kind of make this as streamlined as possible. Please wait. Do not send in another, because we have plenty of duplicates. Please do not send in another application until you can get an email from your staff member that says this is what the corrections that we need.
And Candace, I see someone ask a question about they had children on their subsidy report that did not begin until July the 13th, but they were already on there on July 1st. So if they were on there, then you were already receiving those sustainability payment for that enrollment back in March. And so that's why we had to do a cutoff for that. And that's why we're going based on enrollment, not attendance, just because you've been able to receive that sustainability funding this whole time for that as well. And one other question that we had that I do not think we've addressed is facilities that have multiple locations. We have gotten the question, should they just submit one application for all their locations or a separate application per site? The answer to that is one per site. So this application is per facility. So if you own 5 facilities, you'll need to send in 5 applications.
All right. Now, now, of course, if you own 5 facilities and you have one accounting method, then you would only need one vendor code.
Correct.
You can put the same vendor code on multiple applications. However, you cannot use the same application for multiple facilities.
Mm-hmm. And you'll receive the grant award per site,
right,
per facility.
And payment per facility. Yeah. Another question.
Looks like somebody wants us to go over the STAR vendor number again.
All right. Well, go over Alabama STAR vendor.
Back to that. I can go back to that.
Can you pull that slide up? The number that I know offhand is 334-353-9000. That is the help desk. However, you should go to the website, and she's going to pull that up now for you to review.
Oh, it looks like not.
And that is where you would do the application there on the website. It is very simple. One thing we did catch on this week, there is no fee to do this application.
Yeah.
The fee is only associated for businesses that want to bid for Alabama businesses, for DHR or any other state entity here. So you do not have to pay $200 to get a vendor code.
Somebody says, is it better to email or mail the application? Email would be preferred, but we will accept them through mail as well.
If you have children on the subsidy, at night, do we have to count them? You would count every child that is enrolled in your program that is on the subsidy, no matter if they're there, day, night, on the weekend, it doesn't matter. You need to count every child that you receive subsidy. Again, a little tip, if you check into the web portal on Sunday, that is going to be the closest number that you can get to matching hours. It doesn't matter. It does not matter if you've gotten payment for that child on that day or not. You need to include every child on that payment.
The email address for the application is quality.enhancement@dhr.alabama.gov.
And are there any more questions? Are we omitting those children who are private pay in the account?
Okay, so the ones who are private pay are actually the ones that you're receiving the $300 per child for. So do not admit your private pay children. That's who you're actually receiving the grant award for. So your total number is actually the number that you have once you've taken the subsidy and Head Start or Early Head Start out. So I would imagine that would be all of those who are private pay. Are there any supplemental documents? That's a good question.
That is. We only want the grant application. We do not need a W-9, a canceled check, a copy of your, those are all for the STAARS program. That is not for DHR. Anything that you submit to the only thing you should submit to DHR is the application itself. We do make sure that you complete every line on the application, that nothing is missing. All information must match what we have in the license. So refer to your license, your current license, to make sure that information matches up.
Please do not send us those canceled checks. We've gotten several so far. Somebody says they've received an email that they had errors on their application. When fixing that, do they reply to that email? Yes. So once you receive an incomplete letter, that means your application has been assigned to that person or that employee. So it would be very helpful, instead of replying to the general email box at that point, quality.enhancement, go ahead and reply to that individual. They're the ones who is assigned your application, and that's who you need to send your corrections to.
Oh gosh.
Name of the applicant is the name of the center on the license. No, the applicant needs to be the person's name who's signing the application. The name of the facility and the name of the licensee needs to match the license. If you have an Alabama STAARS vendor code for your first class pre-K, then yes, it would be the same one for this one. You're already in STAARS. So you don't get a different code for every program. It's one code to do business with the state of Alabama. Do you receive a confirmation email for the application?
You do.
Okay.
Yeah. Once it's been submitted to the quality enhancement, the individual that's holding that email will reply that it's been received.
So does that mean that private pay wouldn't have to pay any more? So this is not saying that you don't have to collect tuition or that you cannot collect tuition. This is just some supplemental funding that we're giving to help sustain your child care. And the amount that you're all receiving is based on that formula of $300 per child once we take out or subtract those who are being funded via subsidy and being funded via Head Start and Early Head Start.
Now the question about how long will it take, again, we don't have any time frames at this moment. We're processing them as quickly as possible. We right now have about 400 applications. So we're getting those out as soon as we can. However, it is good to share this webinar with other providers so that they will know that if you don't have errors, then we can process it more quickly. When there are errors, then that delays the processing time. We do not have a time frame of when you will receive funding as well. We will get those done as promptly as we can as well. However, the only time frame that we do have is from the point that you receive funding until December 31st is when that funding should be spent.
So we do have a question about, is the webinar being recorded? And I'm not sure, but we will check with Voices.
It is. Mm-hmm.
Okay, good
And
deal.
YouTube.
So, and YouTube as well. So it's being added to YouTube. And so if you know of individuals who did not get to participate in today's webinar, it will be available so that they can go back and watch that.
And we'll take this last question because we've run out of time.
Yes.
The last question is, if you have children funded from subsidy and EHS, you will subtract that child twice. One time for the subsidy and one time for EHS.
So I just want to thank all of you for your time today. And I, again, want to give a big shout out and thank you to Voices for Alabama's Children for hosting us today. We really appreciate you all helping us get the message out to the child care community for this grant opportunity. And thank you all. We hope that you all have a wonderful day and hope that you all get those applications in soon so that we can get your TASC grants awarded. Thank you.